Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're looking at a concept that's literally going to shatter the way you learn. We're unpacking the active recall advantage. Look, if you've ever felt like you're putting in endless hours of study time or prepping for a massive presentation, only to feel like the info just isn't sticking, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to explore a complete paradigm shift today that's going to totally change your entire approach to acquiring and retaining knowledge.
So, ask yourself honestly, is rereading your notes actually working for you? I mean, we all know the drill, right? You sit down, you open your notebook, you stare at those highlighted pages, and you just read them over and over again. Maybe you even use a few different colored highlighters to make it pop. It feels like you're working hard, but let's be real for a second. How often have you done exactly this, closed the notebook, and immediately realized your mind is just a complete blank? You recognize the words while they're right in front of you, but the second you look away, poof, they vanish.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this incredibly frustrating phenomenon actually has a very specific name, the passive reading trap. And this is our first core concept today. It's a trap precisely because it feels so comfortable and so familiar. I mean, we've been taught to do this for years, but relying on passive reading is highly deceptive. It completely tricks your brain into thinking it's doing the heavy lifting of learning, when in reality, it's just coasting along on autopilot.
Let's define exactly what this means. Passive reading is the traditional study method of simply rereading your notes. That's it, just passing your eyes over the text you've already seen. And the reason this creates such a dangerous illusion of competence is that when you reread, the information feels deeply familiar to you. Your brain goes, oh yeah, I know this, I've seen this before. But here's the catch. Familiarity is not the same thing as mastery. You haven't actually internalized it, you've just recognized it.
Now let's pivot sharply to the heavyweight challenger, active recall. This is framed simply but powerfully as the method of actively testing yourself on the material. Notice the shift in language here. We're moving from simply to actively. We're moving from rereading to testing yourself. Active recall means closing the book, looking away from the screen, and literally forcing your brain to retrieve that information from scratch.
Now, I want to build a little suspense here because you need to understand that these two methods, passive reading and active recall, they aren't just slightly different flavors of studying. Honestly, they aren't even in the same league. So get ready because we're about to hit the central revelation of this entire explainer.
3 times. The staggering reality is that one method is exactly 3 times more effective than the other. Just let that sink in for a second. We aren't talking about some 10% boost in your efficiency. We aren't talking about a slight edge. We are talking about a massive, game-changing multiplier.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what that looks like. You have this tiny little baseline of effectiveness when you just reread your notes. But right next to it, the massive advantage of testing yourself literally towers over it, shooting all the way up to a 3 times multiplier. You are leaving so much potential on the table if you just stick to that baseline.
The data draws a hard line in the sand. Testing yourself is 3 times more effective than rereading notes. That is a definitive, unarguable statement straight from our source. It doesn't say it might be or could be in some cases. It draws an absolute boundary between these two methods.
So now we've got the ultimate side-by-side showdown. On one side, passive reading, which we know just means rereading notes. And on the other side, active recall, which means testing yourself. I want you to critically visualize your own default study habits right now. When you have a big learning task right in front of you, which side do you naturally gravitate toward? If you're like most of us, you lean toward the passive side. Why? Because testing yourself requires effort. It requires a bit of friction.
So, the crucial point is the exact mathematical reality of your study choices. If your action is rereading notes, your effectiveness factor is 1x. But if your action is testing yourself, your effectiveness factor is 3x. Mathematically cementing this idea really means waking up to the fact that rereading is a terrible return on your time investment. Look, if you have an hour to learn something, spending it on a 1x activity when a 3x activity is right there available to you, well, you're practically wasting your own time.
Imagine your mental energy is a finite pie. To really understand what this means for your total study power, if you dedicate that energy to passive reading, you're only accessing a tiny fraction, just 25% of the total possible effectiveness you could be achieving. By simply shifting the method you use to engage with the material, you unlock that massive 75% chunk of power that is testing yourself. You're instantly upgrading your brain's retention engine.
Let's move on and see how this actually builds into a practical strategy. We can turn this incredibly powerful statistical insight right into a direct 2-step action plan.
Step 1, stop simply rereading your notes. Just cut the habit. Step 2, start testing yourself to activate that 3 times advantage. It is literally that straightforward. Close the document, ask yourself a question about what you just read, and force your brain to answer it.
Let's quickly summarize and lock in this blueprint. Passive reading is simply rereading notes. Active recall is testing yourself, and making that switch gives you the advantage of being 3 times more effective. This is the entire blueprint for upgrading your learning capacity, boiled down to its absolute essence. I want to connect this directly back to you and emphasize exactly why this matters. Stop wasting hours on an illusion. Think about what a 3 times multiplier actually means for your daily life. It means you can potentially learn the exact same amount of information in 1/3 of the time if you simply switch your method. Imagine getting hours of your life back every single week, just by replacing that comfortable illusion of rereading with the highly effective friction of testing yourself.
Based on this indisputable reality we've unpacked today, how will you choose to learn moving forward? The data is crystal clear. The advantage is absolutely massive. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative challenge. Next time you need to learn something, will you keep rereading or will you test yourself? The choice and the advantage is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy learning.